college coaches, both in the wrestling, cross country, and track and field space, because that's our bread and butter. And with those people, we're just trying to create conversations because we feel like sometimes, maybe parents, maybe guidance counselors, maybe coaches, they think they have your best interest as an athlete at heart, but there's a lot of great places out there, and we're big on getting out of your bubble and exploring things. And so we're just trying to have conversation with those coaches so people know that there's a lot of schools out there besides the Power Four. And if you're a dedicated student athlete, we can find a place for you to progress and perform at the next level, both in the classroom and on the track or on the wrestling mat.
Could not agree with you more. There is a place for everyone.
Absolutely. We're big proponents of the junior college programs and the systems. Jimmy and I are both junior college All-Americans. Myself, I'm a alumni at Ocean County College like yourself, and Jimmy was an All-American at Middlesex in wrestling.
Yeah, no, hey, listen, man, the junior college system we have is phenomenal, and I owe a lot to OCC at a point in my life when I was a total screw up. So
same here.
Me too. Amen.
You good, Jim?
We are, sir.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, howdy and aloha. We are here, you are there, and we greatly appreciate you tuning in for another amazing episode of Airey Bros Radio. Tonight, we're stepping back in time and honoring one of the voices that shaped the sports media landscape at the Jersey Shore. Before we get rolling, you know the drill. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube. Give us a like for this episode and any other episodes that you see that come across your plate. Drop a comment. Every view, review, and share helps us grow and give back to the sports we love. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And don't forget our sponsors, CS Instant Coffee and Black Sheep Endurance Coaching. As always, we're doing this over here at Airey Bros Radio to shine a light on the programs, coaches, and community leaders we wish we had access to growing up. If you or someone you know is looking for the right fit at the next level or just loves great storytelling, please share this episode. Runners, wrestlers, parents, coaches, pull up a seat. Tonight's guest, if you grew up at the Shore Conference like Jimmy and I did, chances are this guest has been a part of your soundtrack for decades. Kevin Williams is joining us tonight, ladies and gentlemen. He has 46 years covering Shore Conference athletics. He's the founder and director of the WOBM Classics, New Jersey's signature high school hoops tourney. He is an Ocean County College alum. He started calling OCC basketball games as a student, and he's pioneered high school sports coverage in the digital media space through the Shore Conference Sports Network. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Kevin Williams, is an honor and a pleasure to have you with us this evening. We do greatly appreciate your time. Welcome to the show.
Oh, it is my honor. When you go into semi-retirement, you assume everyone has forgotten you. So you guys have good memories. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. It is an honor and a pleasure. And as we've said, you were in the background of a lot of car rides to wrestling tournaments, to track and field and cross-country races. We've had some family members that have played at the WOBM Classic. So we feel like we've known you for a very long, long time. So these usually lend themselves to great conversations with the people that we know. So we are honored to have you with us, and we're excited to get into it with you.
Oh, I can't wait. Let's go.
All right. So, Kevin, before we get in and get rolling, if you have anything you would like to plug or promote, anywhere you would like the fans of Airey Bros Radio to find you, the floor is yours.
A little harder to find now than I used to be, but I actually still contribute to 92.7 WOBM. I do a segment on Friday mornings called The Hometown View, which is 2 minutes of anything I want it to be. From sports to politics, funny, sad, whatever I want to do. It airs live on 92.7 WOBM at 6:35 and 7:35. I then post it to my social media. The station posts it to their Facebook account and also WOBM.com. Pretty much that's the extent of my current, I guess I would say, work situation. Now, I'd like to believe I'm retired, but I'm really not. I'm working on a couple things, and maybe I'll be a little more visible come September or so, but I'm going to spend this summer on the beach.
Okay. Well, we're going to get into that as well too. Probably the most important question, and we'll put all that information in the show notes for you as well, but probably the most important question we're going to ask you, and I think we know the answer, but we're going to ask it anyway. Is it pork roll or Taylor ham?
Come on, is this really still an argument? It's pork roll. It's pork roll. You get a pork roll and cheese sandwich. You don't get a Taylor ham and cheese sandwich. It's pork roll and cheese, man.
Well, we always like to ask because we've had those Ivy League wrestling coaches from North Jersey, and they are Taylor ham through and through. But at this point, with the New Jersey guests that we've had on, pork roll is by far and away the number one in everyone's hearts and stomachs.
No question about it. If somebody says Taylor ham, you got to give them the stinky eye, man.
Absolutely. I think Dave Santa Maria from CBA, former wrestler, I think he had the best answer. He said, I don't care as long as I get my sandwich.
Like that.
Go ahead, Jim.
Kevin, you said you're going to be spending your summer on the beach. What beach would that be?
I have I grew up in Seaside Heights. So when I was a kid, well, first of all, when I was a kid, I worked on the boardwalk for my father. I didn't get to go to the beach too much. I worked, but since I met my wife, which was 45 years ago, I started on 2nd Avenue in Seaside Park, which was her beach as a teenager. We were there until right after Sandy. And what happened is Sandy kind of devastated the beach at Ortley Beach by the surf club and everything. And a lot of Toms River people especially used to go to the Ortley Beach. Well, that summer when that beach was basically off limits, they all moved to Seaside Park and they ended up on 2nd Avenue, partially because Surf Taco is there. There's the Seaside Park Deli is there, White Oak Market. And they all ended up there, and all of a sudden our beach was packed. So we moved a couple of blocks to the north, and since then we are summer residents of North Avenue, which is where we hang out. My wife goes just about every day. The weather is nice. Now that I'm in this state of semi-retirement, I will go a lot more than I used to be, but I will be there most days from mid-June to Labor Day that the weather is nice.
Yes.
You know what? We all have outlets. I live at the Jersey Shore and chose to stay here because I absolutely love the beach and the ocean. And let's face it, we suffered through some miserable winters to get to this. And to me, sitting on the beach, looking at the water, especially early in the morning, listening to the waves break, I don't care how stressed out I am. It sort of takes me down, makes me feel a lot better.
Absolutely. And I spent a handful of summers as a lifeguard in Seaside Park. I was actually on 7th Avenue. So I'm very familiar with that area.
Okay.
and love it as well. I was down at the south end of the beach because of my running prowess, and they needed to get between the greater distances in the sand. So I was either running to 13th or I was running to 2nd to cover calls.
Yeah, 7th, very popular beach still. Very popular.
Absolutely. So you mentioned you grew up in Seaside Heights. Did you go to Central Regional?
I did.
Okay.
I did. I graduated in 1973. When you live in Seaside and you go to Central, it's a long bus trip every day.
Mhm.
Although my entire high school tenure, we were on split sessions. So the day was actually over at 12:19 unless you were an athlete. And then, of course, you had practice after that. I played football. I wasn't much of a player, but I was part of a great team. The Central team in 1971 went 9-0 and finished number 1 at the Shore. It's still controversial to this day because Brick and Red Bank were both undefeated. And I was just with somebody from Red Bank only a week or so ago, and they'll still argue the fact they were the best team that year. But it was a great experience, and I had a great time in high school, probably too great. I'm a proud Golden Eagle.
Okay, go Eagles. We have some family members that are going to be Golden Eagles here in the coming years, so
okay, cool.
We're very familiar with the area. You mentioned you played football. You also mentioned you matriculated and spent some time at Ocean County College. You're an alumni there. When did sports coverage, when did that come about for you?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I'm alumni with an asterisk next to it. I actually got an honorary degree in 2008. The same year my son graduated from Penn State. 2 weeks later, I put the cap and gown on, and they gave me an honorary degree because I never really finished. I was only 17 when I graduated high school. Frankly, I thought I knew what I wanted to do, except I didn't do the things you need to do to get there. And I bounced around at OCC a little bit, but I had a couple of great classes that really sort of paved the way for me. I had voice and diction, which was a very important class. I had public speaking, which was a very important class. Most importantly, I was the editor of the Viking News, which was the college newspaper. And I got into covering the OCC sports, soccer, field hockey. They always had great women's field hockey teams there when I was there, basketball in the winter. I think that kind of got me. I was always a sports freak, but it really got me kind of interested. And then I was asked to be the public address announcer for the Vikings men's basketball team, in which most of my really good friends were on the team. So it was real easy. And I had never done public address. I had done some other broadcasting at Central, but I kind of got into it, had a good time, did it for a couple of years, was encouraged by a couple of people there who were teachers and instructors. Listen, you've got a big voice, big mouth, and you know your sports, and it's really the only thing you do know. And I got pushed. I got pushed into it. I gladly moved in that direction. I ended up going to a broadcasting school, which is no longer in business, and it hasn't been for years. And, there's only a couple of them then that are probably fairly reputable. But I went to the American Academy of Broadcasting in Philadelphia. Listen, fellows, this was culture shock for me. I'm a New York guy. I was born in New York. I had those New York accent, that regionalism, and here I am going to school in Philadelphia, and I hated all the Philadelphia teams. I was a New York sports fan. I hated all the Philly teams. But broadcasting school was great for me. I took it very serious. I lived there with a friend of mine. I worked really hard, did really well. And I think the proof of the pudding was when we, quote unquote, graduated 6 months later, I already had a job and had started my career. So worked out for me.
Okay. Jim, I'll let you go in a second. But, Kevin, you mentioned the going to school in Philadelphia and being from Ocean County and northern Ocean County and Point Pleasant. I just, as a kid, always assumed everyone in New Jersey was New York sports fan. And we went to a wrestling tournament down in South Jersey earlier in middle school, and there was all these people with Philadelphia stuff on. And I always thought that my aunt and uncle that lived in Lacey were anomalies because they were Philly fans. But then when we went down to South Jersey, my dad's like, oh, no, it's like once you kind of get Southern Ocean County just below that and west, everything kind of transitioned and all these people are Philly fans. And it just blew my mind.
Yeah, we used to say, I don't know what the line of demarcation was. I used to always think it was Route 72, everything from there down. But I know between Lacey Road and Route 72, that's a little bit of a Philly territory as well. So I don't know where you could put it, but you'll get a kick out of this. I went to school there during the Rocky period. And because of my combination of that accent and the accent I was moving into, I ended up getting to do a radio commercial on Philadelphia radio in which I had to pose I had to act like a punch-drunk fighter. And I think I got paid $100, which was a lot of money then, and I was living on nothing at the time. So it was a good experience.
Kevin, coming out of the American Broadcasting School, did you go right to WOBM?
No, actually, I started working at WJRZ 100.1. Started working before, about a month before I was done with broadcasting school. WJRZ at the time had a glass news booth in the middle of the Ocean County Mall. And they had a 2.5 person news department, and you did your news from this booth. You had the microphone, the tape recorder, everything there. It was great when you were young because we're a better place to see girls than at the middle of the Ocean County Mall. But the last month of school in Philadelphia, I moved back home. I would leave school in Philly at 3:00, drive to Toms River. I would do the 6, 7, and 8:00 news at night, drive home to Seaside Heights, sleep, get up in the morning, go back to school in Philadelphia. But I had already been hired at JRZ, and they told me, look, once you're done, we have a full-time job for you. And sure enough, once I finished in June, I started working there full-time as a newscaster and a commercial copywriter. I was there for 1 year before WOBM offered me what at that time was my dream job.
Rich, do you remember that? Was that around at all when you were around in the center of the mall, or was that gone?
I don't know. I can't recall there being that in the Ocean County Mall, but I'm still amazed with all the malls and stuff that are closing down that the Ocean County Mall has still withstood the test of time.
This would have been like the summer of 1979.
Okay. So you were
still 78 actually. Let me take it back. 78. So
yeah, memories are few and far from
that I understand.
Period, Jim.
Yeah.
I was 2 years old.
So Kevin mentioned that there's not a lot of broadcasting schools that are around anymore, and radio has kind of gone a different direction from the days when you started. What do you think the peak at WOBM was and your radio career?
You know, from a standpoint of pure radio, when radio really was the community outlet, you know, we used to kind of make fun of the fact that you guys will probably not remember this, but in the mid 80s, there was a very famous news story here in Toms River. It was the Maria Marshall murder. She was murdered on the rest stop on the Garden State Parkway. Her husband was a very well-known guy in Ocean County. Kids were involved in sports and the whole thing. But the guy who was a very well-known author named Joel McGinnis spent the whole trial living in Seaside Park, covering this to write a book. And he wrote a book afterwards called Blind Faith. He changed the names of almost all of the characters in the book. And the big thing at that time, now guys, remember, no internet, no social media, no nothing. The big thing afterwards was trying to match the fictitious names with the real names. And somebody created a cheat sheet, and it was a who's list of people who were somehow mentioned at some point in the book. But the book started with, you've reached Toms River, New Jersey, when you could no longer get your New York FM radio station on the car radio. And, we used to always use that as a promotional piece when it came to advertising agencies in New York and Philadelphia, who would say, well, we don't need local radio in Ocean County. We come out of New York and Philly, and we would show them the page in the book, and they would have a better understanding. I think for me, and listen, I'm prejudiced. I did the mornings at OBM for many, many years with my partner, Steve Paul. I did the morning show. I was up at 2:30 in the morning. I was on the air from, we were on from 5 to 9. I would tell you that in my mind, the mid 80s was kind of like right around the home run time for local radio, not just for WOBM, but for local radio. You didn't have all the things we have today. Cable TV was cable TV, and it was just a great time. I think I hit it perfectly. I have no regrets over that. The world is different. Listen, people still listen to radio. Radio is never going away. But, my analogy is it's the pizza pie. You cut it now you're cutting that pie in 18 slices. It used to be 6 or 8. Now it's 18. You have so many different outlets, and people don't want to wait. I used to do morning sports reports on OBM for years, like clockwork, 5:30, 6:30, 7:30, 8:30. And I knew that I had a pretty good audience that was getting up in the morning wanting to know, especially in the winter, who won the big wrestling match last night. Because again, if they weren't there, how would they get it? Who won the big wrestling match? Who won the big basketball game? I had it before anyone. Newspapers sometimes miss deadlines, whatever. But I would be able to do that, and people would tune in for a specific time. The world we live in today, people listen when they want to listen. They watch podcasts when they want to watch them. They're in their car driving for an hour and a half. Great time to put on a podcast like this one. Great time to listen. So I think that's changed a bit. Radio is still there. It's not dead. It's not going away. But I don't think it has the impact in most cases that it did 30, 40 years ago.
At what point did you see that changing, that it was going towards digital more?
That's a really good question. When they started putting the Sirius radios in cars, and the car makers did that, and now of course, our job when all the years I worked in radio, when we were selling against other mediums, we would say, yeah, you get 6 months free, but then you got to pay for it, and the percentage of people who then paid for it was actually relatively low. At least at that time. But I think 2005 to 2010, I think you started seeing a shift. And then the other things came into play. Let's face it, the what we used to call the cell phone became your lifeblood. It became everything. It's like, having a mini computer in your pocket. Streaming became a big thing. Digital, the company that I most recently worked with, Town Square Media, through WOBM. I give them credit. They were way ahead of the curve when it came to all the digital stuff. I mean, they don't consider themselves selling radio. They're selling, answers to help your business grow, regardless of what it is. But digital started becoming a bigger factor. People could get things when they wanted it. How many people wake up in the morning, go to their phone to see how the Yankees did last night? They fell asleep during the game. So I think that's all changed. But I think 2005, 2010, in around that, and I think it's just become, different. Again, I just believe the pie is just split so many ways.
Yeah, you mentioned Blind Faith. I believe they made that into a made-for-TV movie as well, too. I can remember.
Yes,
Mom and Pop. Everyone was engrossed in that.
Everyone. Yeah, it was a big movie. I think it was Robert Ulrich was the guy who played the lead. But yeah, I always, people ask me, what are the biggest stories that I was involved in my 46 years here involved in media, and I always say there were two. I don't know what order, but the Toms River Little League winning the World Series in 1998 just captivated the community. And that not the trial, but the murder itself. I always remember that. It was on a weekend morning. We were going to the beach. We got to the beach. We had a radio with us, and it was in early September, and I had WOBM on, and I heard them come on with the hour's top story was the Toms River woman was killed last night. And from that time on until that trial ended, I mean, that story was just, I had relatives in California. They would call me up. What's going on in Toms River? It was a big deal. It really was.
Yeah. And I mentioned the 80s as being such a great decade. And Jimmy and I always reminisce about those things and dig into old movies and throwbacks and comparing different athletes to different eras and stuff like that. So, this is a great time, and I love to reminisce about those things.
Yeah.
I'm curious, you mentioned WOBM kind of being ahead of the curve and getting involved with some of those things. For lack of a better term, do mom and pop local radio stations still exist, or they kind of fall under an umbrella of like a bigger conglomerate?
It's what's happened to everything, guys. You've seen it living here. There used to be 20 different banks, and there was one location banks, and then they got bought up, and then they got bought up, and then they got bought up, and then you were left with a handful. It's happened to everything, and radio has fallen into that. It's in many other parts of the country, it may still exist. I can see where in a small town in the Midwest, you could have one radio station and be very successful there with all the local business and all that. But really, we have gotten into the age of conglomerates, mega companies. People are familiar with some of them, iHeart and things like that. But WOBM is part of Town Square Media, which has, I'm off a little bit, but about 325 radio stations across the country, mostly in small and medium markets and no big cities. That was never their philosophy. Actually, the Jersey Shore market is probably one of their 10 biggest markets in the company. But, but again, 325 radio stations. So what does that allow you to do? Well, you don't need 325 general managers, because a lot of them are in clusters where there might be 8 or 10 in the same area. So you only need one person to do something where you used to have 8 or 10. So the whole business has changed. I think the difference is, and again, I'm older than you guys. So for me, growing up, like I remember the late 60s, like listening to WABC radio, and then into the 70s on the school bus going to Central, they'd have WABC radio on. All the kids listened to it. I think what's happened is radio has gone from that magical place, like it was almost inconceivable what it was, to it's just another part of our lives. We still have very loyal listeners. There are still diehards, dedicated, follow different shows, but I think it's all changed. And for me, I've read stories about what it was like in radio in the 60s and 70s, and some interesting books about the shenanigans that went on. Radio stations were all live, most part, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That is a rarity now. So, like everything else, I mean, what hasn't changed in the business world that you guys have seen, right? Everything's changed.
Everything, yeah.
Kevin, you mentioned that 1998 Little League World Series team, the Beast of the East, and how it captivated everyone. And that was right dab in the middle of my childhood, and our aunt and uncle lived in the same neighborhood as the Gainers. So
Okay.
we were following when Colin and I think it was the oldest Frazier went the first time, and they didn't win, and then Casey and Todd Frazier,
Yep.
they went and they won. Can you talk about that a little bit? You mentioned how it captivated everyone.
Yeah, I remember Colin and Jeff. That was 1995. Jeff Frazier. That's when I jumped in the fray. I went. Not only did I cover them in the state final, not only did I go to Bristol, Connecticut, and stay there the whole time, I then drove home here, basically packed my bags, and then went out to Williamsport, Pennsylvania, stayed in the same hotel as the team, was there the entire time. I came back after they had a day off. I drove back. I picked up my son, who at that time was, how old was Brandon? Bro, Brandon was the same age. He was the same age as Todd and those guys. I picked him up. We went back. I was there. Every morning I did report. I would interview players and coaches, and then the next morning I would go on the radio. I'd play the interviews, talk about the upcoming games. I covered the whole thing. I emceed the welcome home parade they had. It ended up with a reception at Toms River High School South on a beautiful September day with thousands of people. We put them in we rented the float, and we created a float for the Halloween parade. We had the whole team on it. We got them jackets, and they all wore I was all in on that. And then even, the following year, when it was just Casey, as far as the Gainers were concerned, while his dad was still managing, went back with him again. And I'll tell you, they probably would have gotten to the finals that year had they not gotten rained out, which screwed up their pitching out there. But that was amazing. I mean, and what was nice about it? It really wasn't, Toms River had the Marshall murder, and then you had the whole thing with the cancer cluster, which was a terrible thing. So it always seemed like Toms River was in the news for bad things. And all of a sudden you had this thing to celebrate, 12 and 13-year-old boys, Little League Baseball. What's more innocent than that, And, these kids became superstars, went on the Tonight Show. I mean, it was just incredible. And to see that in your own community, and to see the pride people had in it, and everyone seemed to have a connection to someone on the team. well, my cousin goes to school with him, whatever it was. It was a pretty cool thing. And it was huge. It was they had watch parties. I mean, and again, and 98, they didn't cover every game on ESPN. Not every game. They covered some. By a couple of years later, all the games, and still today, all those games are on. You can watch them anywhere you want. So we actually broadcast all the games in 95 and 98. I didn't get to do them myself. I would do a pregame show, but there was a network you had to subscribe to. But we broadcast all those games back here. And, if they were playing on a Wednesday at 2:00, people were at work, so how do you follow it? Well, they got to listen on the radio. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was at that parade, and I remember watching all those guys on the television shows. And I'm living in Lake Mary, Florida now, and they just won it this year. And I was waiting for all that to happen, and I was like, "Well, was I just young? Did it seem bigger than what I thought?" But no, it seemed pretty big back then. And
yeah,
you mentioned Todd Frazier, and we know where he went, and you had a firsthand seat, and you've had that firsthand, throughout Monmouth, Ocean County. You've got to see some great Olympians, NCAA champs come up. Can you talk about different athletes that you saw coming up in high school that you knew there was something there?
Well, I always remember this. I was in the office at WOBM, which at that time was on Route 9 in Bayville, and our manager was a very popular radio personality in his own right, a guy named Bob Levy, who was really there forever. Like we always said, for all intents and purposes, he built WOBM. Yeah, Topic A, right? So Bob came in on a Monday morning, and the way it would start with, I did the morning show with my friend Steve Paul. We did from 5 to 9. And at 9:00 on Monday, we'd always go into Bob's office. He had 2 guest chairs in his office, small office, and we'd sit there and we'd probably spend an hour just chewing the fat about anything, and I remember going in there on a Monday morning, and Bob Levy came in. He was so excited. He said, "I'm going to tell you right now, on Saturday, I saw a kid play football, and I'm going to tell you this. You can bank on it. You are going to talk about this kid for 4 years. He was a freshman. You're going to talk about him for the next 3 years." But he went on and on. "I'll guarantee it. I'll bet you anything." I said, "Well, what was the guy's name?" He said, "Keith Elias." And he had seen him play a freshman game because I think at the time his girlfriend's son went to Lacey High School, and he had just gone there on a Saturday. And boy, was he ever right. I mean, I followed Keith throughout. To this day, we remain good friends. We stay in touch. So I think I had a pretty good early indication of him. Obviously, Todd, listen, the one thing I've seen in you guys in your sports days, there are a lot of kids who reach their peak at about 13 years old. Like that's it. Maybe they were physically bigger than other kids their age, so they were able to dominate, whether it be baseball, basketball, football. It didn't matter. Wrestling, whatever it was, they matured earlier, and then all of a sudden everyone caught up with them. And by the time they were 17, they really weren't any special, But I got to see some kids early in their careers. I knew about Mike Gesicki pretty early. People had started telling me about him, and I started following him when he was a sophomore. And obviously he didn't disappoint and just signed a new 2-year contract with the Cincinnati Bengals not too long ago. So he's still playing. Al Leiter is a really interesting one. Of course, the pitcher. Al went to my alma mater. His baseball coach was my baseball coach in high school, who I was very friendly with until he passed away. And I knew about the Leiter brothers. And, of course, Kurt was the oldest one. And I saw Kurt pitch. And then, people would say, "Hey, look, Kurt's really good." You know what? There's younger ones coming up, and, there's Mark, and there's Al, and there's Mark. And I was there today. Al struck out 39 in that famous baseball game with Wall High School, the 31, whatever the number was, at Wall High School. I had him as a guest on a show I did many times, handled himself very well, followed him, went to cover him in spring training when he was with the Yankees. And Jeff Musselman before him, another Central guy. Central has done pretty good when it comes to baseball players. Jeff Musselman played for the Toronto Blue Jays and the New York Mets in his career. Had a really good career until injuries, and now he works for the #1 baseball agent in all of sports, guy named Scott Boras. Jeff has been like his right-hand man for the last 20 plus years. So I saw them at a young age. I saw Pete Panuska, a running back at Brick High School, when he was a sophomore. And people at Brick told me he's going to be, and Brick, of course, has a very storied football career, has had some great players, but everyone said, hey, this kid is really special. And I watched him run for 3 years at Brick High School, and he was special. He was tremendous, went on to the University of Tennessee. So, I've had that neatness where some of these guys became good friends because when I started, I wasn't that much older than they were. I started in the business basically at 23. So they're 17, 18, some of them, right? So, I think they thought of me more as a friend. As time went on, I became the grumpy old sports guy, but at that time, I built a lot of really, really good relationship with guys. Todd Durkin, who played football at Brick and has been very successful in the physical fitness industry, among other things. And I love those things. Those were the special things that I got to see. People would always say to me, guys, and you could hopefully understand this. When I had been at the same place for basically my entire career. Was there times when I wanted to maybe make a move early in my career when I was still single? I pursued ESPN, radio in New York, things like that. Then you get married and, your wife's job is here. And then you have children and they're here. And I think I got to a point in time when I was probably around in my mid-30s. And I said, that's it. I would rather be a somewhat big fish in a small pond than a guppy in the Atlantic Ocean, And I was able to move into a fairly comfortable lifestyle. I worked very hard. I worked wild hours. I know when you have Bob Batters on not too long ago, my buddy, he talked about the hours. The event dictates the hours, not your day. You don't punch a time clock. If you've got a game at night that's 2 hours away, that's where you go. And if you got to get up the next morning to do something early, well, you got to do it. So, I've had, I wouldn't say a front row seat, but I've got to see some really good athletes build some really good relationships with people I still have today.
Front row seat. That's what it is. I think I messed that up. But you mentioned Bob Levy, and I don't want to leave that on the table. You did an awesome interview with him 8 years ago on the WOBM website. And Rich and I, we grew up going to church on Sundays, listening to him on the drive. And when we went to Aunt Joan and Uncle Jack's house on the weekends, they listened to him all throughout breakfast. So you were listening to him. To us, he's a legend, right? You mentioned kind of that big fish, small pond, right? People outside of that area might not know who he is. But can you share some stories about Bob?
Well, I'll tell you, you'll like this one. So it's 1979. And I'm working in the news booth in the middle of the Ocean County Mall, and a guy knocks on the door, and he introduces himself and said he's the general manager at WOBM. And it wasn't Bob. And I knew the name because he was also the morning news anchor. And he said, we'd like to talk to you about coming to work at WOBM. Now, WJRZ was kind of like a top 40 radio station, and I thought of myself as kind of a young and wild kind of guy. It's my first job, and I'm thinking of WOBM. Well, that's like the old people's radio station. Like that's, again, you're 23, you don't think things too well. So I really wasn't interested because I had heard the station, of course. As a matter of fact, when I was in high school, I used to do football game reports on the station, but I had heard it, but like the music was more of a beautiful music kind of format. It really wasn't aimed at me. It was aimed at your parents and your grandparents. So I said, I don't really think I would fit in with your demographic. And he said, look, we're looking to hire our first full-time sports director. And my ears kind of perked up because at JRZ, I was doing mostly news. And then every day I would do 1 5-minute sportscast, but I really wanted to be a sportscaster. So they said, he said, look, come in for an interview. So we set up an interview. Might have been the only time I ever wore a suit there, but I came in 2 weeks later, and it was that little building on Route 9 in Bayville. You drove by it a million times. You saw the antenna, the tower, and it looked so small. And it was when you went in the building, you realized it was kind of like there were a couple of additions on it and all that. And he walked me in the beginning of the building. And he came up to an office and he said, it's the guy sitting behind a chair. He said, this is Bob Levy. He's going to start the interview with you. I had heard of him because he voiced some things on the radio station, including he did a couple of high school football games. He was the voice of brick football for many years. So I go in, he closes the door, and I sit down. And in Bob's style, he's leaning back in his chair. He's got an unlit cigarette in his mouth. And he said, who's the football coach at Brick High School? I said, Warren Wolf. He said, who's the basketball coach at Lakewood High School? And I said, Bob Nastas. And he asked me 2 other questions, which I don't remember. And I answered them. And then he hit on the intercom to Roger. He said, hey, come back here. So the guy came back. He said, he's the guy. I went in the back office with the general manager who said, okay, here's what we're looking for, where you would be doing 4 morning sports reports. And you would have to pre-record a couple for the afternoon. But there's one little stipulation. Until we get someone else, you have to do a Sunday night news shift from 6 p.m. to midnight. And you have to be back on the air at 5:30 the next morning. And at that time, I lived in Seaside Heights with my parents. So I really did not want to do news. I really didn't want to do it. So I saw Bob on the way out, and I said, look, they offered me the job, $175 a week, which was $35 more than I had been making. So it was, and they told me if I survived 6 months, I'd go up to $200 a week. So I wasn't sure. And Bob said, look, don't worry about the one news shift. If this is what you want to do, take the job. I really wasn't sure. I was contemplating moving to Arizona. Had a bunch of friends who were going to Arizona State University. I had gone to visit them, fell in love with the whole area, the Tempe area, and, the weather and all of that. And I said, this is where I belong, and the whole thing. And I went home and I talked to my parents over the weekend. And of course, my mother, especially, who was a big sports fan, bigger sports fan than my father, my mother said, hey, you got to do this. You absolutely have to do this. You're out of your mind. So on Monday, I called Bob. And I told him I thought I was going to take it. He said, look, take it. You'll have a lot of fun, blah, blah. I took the job. And as the saying goes, the rest is history. But I'll give you the Bob Levy story and you guys, having listened to him and your families knowing a little bit about him, and you can sometimes picture him. So in the early 80s, he was a member at Woodlake Country Club in Lakewood, which at that time was a private club. It was a member. He was a member. He played golf. They played a lot of cards there. There was a lot of gambling that went on, a whole thing. This is a long time ago. But part of the thing about being a member is you had a social membership, and you had to use a certain amount each month or you were going to lose it. Now, I don't know what the amount was. Might have been $100, $150. But if you didn't go there and use that, dinner, drinks, whatever, it just went away. So he calls me up. I'm recently married. So it's probably like 83, somewhere around there. He calls me up. And he said, hey, what are you doing tonight? I said, nothing. He said, you want to go to dinner? I said, he says, I got to use my social membership at Woodlake. And it's 2 people won't cut it. Got to make it 4. I got to use it or I'm going to lose it. So I jump in. We take it. We go over there, his house. Then we go to Woodlake, and it's packed because everyone is in the same position. they got to use their social membership this last weekend. It's like the Saturday, the 30th of the month or whatever. So we order drinks and it takes forever to come. And he's starting to lose his patience. He's not a patient fellow. Never was. So then our water glasses are empty and the guy is not coming over to fill them. So he absolutely starts turning red and he gets up and he walks over to where the pitchers of water are and he grabs a pitcher and he comes over to the table standing, pours from the very top. And he was like 6'2", Bob. So he's got his arm up in the air. So he's probably pouring from 7 feet water. Would you like more water? And the water is going all over the table. Like we are all horrified. And when he finally finishes, he slams the pitcher down. He said, "Let's get out of here." And we get up and walk out. And that was Bob Levy.
That's amazing. Well, yeah, that's a surprise. And I think maybe the unlit cigarette is a surprise, but I think at that time, and that's kind of just goes with the job description, right? Like broadcasting news.
To this day, I miss him greatly. How many times I've gone to the phone. We used to talk about everything, sports wise. We would just every day of the week, even after we left work. And how many times I've gone to my phone to call him, and I still remember his number, to call him to say, "Hey, did you see that putt that Rory just made?" And I realized I can't talk to him, and I miss him. I do miss him.
Well, we appreciate you sharing some stories with us and you getting all up in the fields. You mentioned Wood Lake Country Club. That's where we used to have our Point Pleasant Borough sports banquet. So Jimmy and I have had many meals at the Wood Lake Country Club. And, there's a lot of people back home that are always trying to get us to come home and make the hero's journey. But you mentioned Tempe and Scottsdale and Phoenix, and that's another destination that's on our list. So I don't think we're getting any closer to getting Jimmy back to New Jersey with that.
I'm sure we're almost out of time, and I've probably taken too much, but I just want to jump on something from listening to some of your other shows. I know the issue of the multi-sport athlete has been brought up.
Yes,
and
love that
I
topic.
am such an advocate for this. I don't understand kids who have the ability to play multiple sports in high school with their friends, with kids from their neighborhood, with people they grew up with, who at the age of 8 or 9 decide or have their parents decide that they should be a specialist. And it drives me crazy, the 3-sport athlete to me. And I do see some signs that maybe in some places it's coming back a little bit because there's been so much out there. I mean, how many times have you read about a 10 or 11-year-old kid having Tommy John surgery? I mean, and I think people are starting to realize, playing, and I'm not picking on baseball, but playing baseball 11 months out of the year and being a pitcher, but when you don't pitch, well, you're not going to pitch all the time. You're going to play shortstop, which you're going to throw anyway, or playing soccer. I see these kids who play soccer on multiple teams, multiple leagues, and it's not surprising that many, and maybe many is the wrong word, but quite a few suffer burnout. They get to that age of 13, 14, 15. Hey, they don't want to run to 2 practices a day. They want to be with their friends. They want to go do something. I am just such a believer in, the 3-sport high school athlete. I'm talking high school. The 3-sport high school athlete is a beautiful thing. You get to, and in most cases, the other sports complement what you're trying to do. If you're better in one, if you're a really good football player, tell me how wrestling or lacrosse won't help you. I mean, they're both great complements. Wrestling for strength, tenacity, lacrosse, running. You got to be in unbelievable shape to play. So, I mean, there's all those things, and I hate it when I hear a kid, he was a great football player, and he was a great football player, but his father has him convinced he should play baseball here, so he's not going to play football any longer. Drives me crazy. And, I'm a big believer in a lot of the best athletes. When we talk about the best, I talk about Mike Gesicki, football, basketball, volleyball, played all three, did pretty well for himself. Didn't hurt his football career, did it? Not just one example, I know.
Well, yeah, you mentioned those, and that's a big thing with us. And two athletes that come to mind when we talk about multi-sport athletes and just unbelievable talents. One of them I was fortunate enough to go to high school and college with was Christy Pierce, who was a phenomenal athlete. She whooped my butt in the mile in middle school. Over 2,000 points in basketball. She was all shore and field hockey, and then obviously went on to do the great things that she did on the soccer field. And there was also rumors that if you put a golf club in her hand, she was pretty good on a golf course. And the other one that comes to mind is from Jackson Memorial High School, Rob Johnson.
I knew you were going to say that.
Who was unbelievable. I played, at the time it was the Metro Stars, I believe, maybe even played for the Red Bulls, but was a 2-time state champion in wrestling and short conference champion in the high jump. He could high hurl. He might have even won the short conference in that. Just a phenomenal talent.
At that time when he played, many of the soccer fields, if not most of the soccer fields around here, were grass.
Right.
It was before people started putting turf in. When I saw him play on turf, you couldn't keep your eyes off of him if you could keep them on him because he moved so fast. He was the fastest thing I've ever seen on a soccer field with a ball. He was just amazing. And you're right. 3 sport athletes, exceptional. Could have been 4 or 5 sport athletes. There's no doubt about it. And just touching on what you said about Christy Pierce, she came along really at the beginning. I shouldn't say the beginning, but as girls/women's sports went to another level. I'm, again, older than you. In high school, the most athletic girls were cheerleaders. Yeah. And I don't say that, so I'm not being facetious, because there really wasn't a lot for them. This was before we had girls soccer, and you had field hockey. A lot of the female athletes at that time were bigger and stronger. And you had the more athletic ones, the petite ones. They didn't really have a place in some cases. Well, here comes Christy Pierce at the Jersey Shore, puts Point Borough and then Monmouth University on the map for how amazing she is. And we all know what she went on. But now look what's happened. Someone says to me, what's the biggest change you've seen in high school sports from when you started to now? It is without question girls sports. The girls don't cheer for you. You're cheering for the girls watching them play.
Absolutely. And Christy was even a 2-sport athlete in college. She played basketball for Monmouth
for
a while
too.
Too.
Yes, she did, which is amazing. Yeah.
I think she might even dabbled in lacrosse when she got to college a little bit.
She was special, very special.
Kevin, I know we're running over a little bit. Are you all right on time?
Yeah, where am I going? I'm retired for now.
Every day's Saturday.
So I've got 2 more for you before we get in the Final Four if Rich doesn't have anything, but we're talking about some professional athletes from the Jersey Shore. Did you get to cover or follow the career of Martin Truex at all?
I'd be a liar if I said I did. I knew of him, and I certainly mentioned him a few times in little snippets. Number one, I was never a NASCAR person. So, and I wasn't familiar with the sport. I did have a favorite driver. I was a big Jeff Gordon fan. I like Jeff Gordon. I think that's because his wife was beautiful, but, and I really didn't follow it. And I probably didn't appreciate the popularity of it, even in this area. My next door neighbor for 40 years is still there. He was a big NASCAR guy, used to go down to that Dover, Delaware race every year, and I'd see him leaving on a Friday with the stickers on his car. I don't even remember who his favorite driver was, but I never really grasped it until much later. But I was just down in Manahawkin the other day, and I saw Martin Truex Drive or Martin Truex Boulevard, whatever it is. What a career. And I mean, there's another guy who probably helped put it, especially Southern Ocean County, on the map. I mean, there used to be always the debate, where is he from? Because sometimes they would say Stafford Township. Sometimes they would say, was it Marietta or another section of Stafford, right? And then, of course, there was Manahawkin, but he's been honored by Southern Regional High School and has been good to the school. But man, oh man, I mean, one of the best in the world.
Yeah, I've told this story a bunch on Airey Bros, and Rich has heard it too many times. But our mother was a principal at Southern Regional Middle School, and when Martin was in school, she was an assistant principal, and he was always in her office. And she'd always be like, "Martin, what are you gonna do with your life, man? Like you're always getting in trouble." And he'd always say to her, "Miss Airey, I'm gonna be making a lot more money than you one day."
Well, that's a case of someone at a young age knowing exactly what he was going to do. I know his father was involved and all of that, but really, I mean, incredibly popular. And again, as you get south, Lacey Road down to Route 72, he is extremely well known.
And doing research for this podcast, I saw you did a podcast on the Lakewood Blue Claws with someone a couple years back. What was it like for you being the guy who covered sports, WOBM, and now there's a professional baseball team in your backyard?
Yeah, it was a big deal. The councilman in Toms River at the time, the late Roden Lightbody, tried desperately to bring a minor league baseball team to Toms River prior. If you guys are familiar with Toms River High School North, behind the school, it used to be, it's now condos and apartments. But at that time, it was pretty much just a big pit. And he, in his mind, this is the place, Toms River, we're going to build a baseball stadium, right here. You got so many people and surrounding communities, and he tried desperately. Traffic was going to be a nightmare. They never could solve that. It never happened. So here comes the Lakewood Blue Claws. And I jumped on them from the very beginning. It was a big deal to us. I was there when they had their first introductory press conference, which was in the Lakewood Industrial Park. Stadium was not even built yet. Then they had the Name the Team contest. I covered that. I think the person who won it, we had him on the radio. And then when they came along and then their first game, I went down. We got a sponsor to sponsor me going down there. And I went down and they were playing. Here's the connection. They were playing the Kannapolis Intimidators, owned by Dale Earnhardt. Intimidator, right? Wasn't that his nickname?
Yeah.
And I think, and I could be wrong, I think it was right after, like literally a couple of months or a month after he died, or right around that time. It was close. And when you went in the stadium in Kannapolis, there was one of his cars sat right out front, like as you entered the stadium. And I was there for the first game. I always remember this. There was a foul ball hit by one of the Kannapolis players that hit a young spectator in the stands. And there was a hush. They had to fly a helicopter into the outfield to airlift her to the hospital. The next morning on the news, was on all the news stations. I think she ended up okay, but it was a very scary moment. But so I caught that Blue Claw fever early. In one of the early years, their play-by-play announcer was they just hired a new play-by-play announcer who would also be the media relations director. He wasn't there for the home opener, the season opener. He wasn't there because he was broadcasting minor league hockey in West Virginia, and they had one game left. So Jeff Brown, who was the original general manager of the team, called me up and said, "Can you do our game tomorrow, like next week, next Tuesday? We need an announcer. Can you do the game with one of our interns who's studying to do this?" And I said, "Absolutely." Well, it was the home opener. Guys, I'm not lying. It was about 30 degrees at first pitch. It was so cold. And of course, there's always a lot of pomp and circumstance with the first game, right? So the place was packed, but I mean, literally everyone was gone before the game even started. The only thing selling was they had a coffee stand, and that coffee stand sold all their coffee. The announcer was a guy named Greg G. Ambarisi, who was an intern at the time. Well, Greg, to this day, is still the Blue Claws radio guy and their media relations guy, and is a wonderful person. There was a pitcher for the Blue Claws named Carlos Monasterios. He had never been in a situation where he was anywhere in his life below 70 degrees. And he goes out on the mound and he can't get anyone out. The first inning must have lasted, and again, I've forgotten much more. I think the other team scored 8 or 9 runs. It was so cold. This poor guy didn't last the first inning. He was gone. He went into that clubhouse. You can be sure he was just laying by a heater. But I went to all the Blue Claws openers. I always enjoyed covering the team for the time that I was working. I think listen, Ocean County's very lucky to have it. It's professional baseball. I think I could be wrong, but about 60 of those guys have made it to the major leagues, have played, most of them for the Phillies, have been there. I saw Ryan Howard and Cole Hamels and those guys. It's a fraction of what it would cost you to go to a major league game. You get to sit close. You see everything. I had season tickets for a couple of years. I used to go. My kids had a blast. It's a great asset. It really is. Even today, to this day, it still is. So, yeah, I was sort of close with the Blue Claws for a long time. Haven't gone yet this year. I will. I'm waiting for the warmer weather.
Got to balance that with your beach time.
That's right.
Yeah, you hit it on the head. It's an asset, and we are blessed to have that right in our backyard and see them before they become pros. And I know I said I only had 2 more, but I lied. Do you have any advice for any kids listening to this podcast? Anyone who wants to get into sports media and doesn't know where to start?
Be a police officer. It is. Listen, as we've pointed out, the business has changed dramatically. In my early years, when we were live 24 hours a day, your newest employee, on-air person, and I'm talking about what they used to call disc jockeys, they now call them on-air personalities, whatever you want to call them. You started them if they work either part-time or they work the overnight shift. They would work from like midnight to 5 a.m. Let's be honest. Not a lot of people listening. A great place to make some mistakes. You're not going to ruin the station, So that's where you always put the newbie, the 23, 24, 25-year-old who maybe just graduated college, or maybe they had gone to a broadcasting school. You gave them a shot there. Unfortunately, those jobs are very few and far between now. Most radio stations are not live 24 hours a day. With technology, it sounds like they're live, but they're not. So you don't have as many of those starting positions. I've always told, as recently as a couple of years ago, and I would speak to either high school or college classes, there's 2 things. Number one, you have to know that this is what you want to do. You can't just all of a sudden say, maybe I'll, you got to know it. You got to feel it. You got to eat. You got to love it. Number 2, you got to have a plan B. If you just set your sights on being one thing, and I know that sounds terrible. You want to host the Tonight Show when you get older. Hey, great. Good luck. But, at some point when you're 45 and you're not doing it, you might want to think about something else. And I say the same about media. Absolutely have a goal, but have a plan B, even if it's in a related field. You don't have to be on the air. You can now with technology. Look, now there are as many people working in digital departments as there are on air. There are people who do all of that stuff, so there are a myriad of other positions that you could say are really not broadcasting, but in media. There are writers. There are people who operate cameras. There are podcast hosts. I mean, there are people who do it. So whatever you want to do, be well-versed that you can bounce. Don't be a specialist. You say, I want to be a sportscaster. How many sportscasting jobs at any given time do you think there are even in the country? It's not a lot. So if you've got to do something else first to get in position to be a sportscaster, go ahead and do it. My last thing on this would be, I would still recommend you go to college. I would still recommend you get a 4-year degree. If you're in high school, grasp English, because everything we do in life involves reading and writing. I don't care what you do. There is reading and writing involved in it. So, learning your skills in English, learning vocabulary, that will certainly be a benefit in anything to do with media. So, do that. Go to college. Find a school that has a great communications department, that has a college radio station, TV station, newspaper, whatever it is, that you can do those things. Because the one thing about broadcast, anything in media, you got to do it with your hands. And I don't mean you're fixing, but you got to do it. You can't read it out of a book. You don't learn it out of a book. It's like being a car mechanic. You can read all you want. You got to get under the hood and do things. That's how you learn how to be a car mechanic. In my business, you got to learn by doing it. Going somewhere where you can get on the radio station or TV station, where you can write for whatever it happens to be. You got to be able to do it, which leads me to a small school that has good department is every bit as valuable as a big school. I know there are Syracuse and University of Missouri. They're great schools. But all the years I worked in radio, the most people I worked with who had gone to any one college had gone to Rowan University, which was Glassboro, because they had a very good communications media program. So there you go.
Amen. Well, Jimmy stole my thunder with that question. So I got one for you, though, Kevin. Last one, and then we'll get into the final four. I'm curious, you mentioned you got into radio at a very early age. You mentioned not wanting to necessarily go to WOBM at first because it was, maybe your parents or your grandparents type of music. Have you ever spun any records in your day?
You know what? Never. And it's funny because when I was in broadcasting school, I did, because they assumed that most of the people were going to get their first job at a small radio station where they'd be spinning records, doing the weather, reading news headlines, maybe doing promotions, whatever. And I was terrible at it. Oh my goodness. I wish I still had my air check. I was terrible. Oh, I was awful. And I used to get a lot of wows. We actually used 33 1/3 albums for almost all our music. So you'd put it on and you had to cue it up. You'd put it down and you used to get it to when you got the whoop, you try. And the whole idea is when you hit the record, it would go right into it. You didn't get any of that. I was terrible. The needle would pop. I was not good, but no, I never spun records. Part of it is it's never a great music guy. I know you guys are music guys. I was never really a music aficionado. Probably only been to about 12 concerts in my life, which is nothing compared to, I have friends who've been to 200, so.
Okay. Fun fact.
Final
four, Jim?
Yeah, let's do it, sir. Kevin, are you a coffee drinker?
Oh, yeah.
How do you brew it and how do you take it?
You know what? You guys you're going to hate me for this answer. Number one, I do not make coffee at home. Okay. For all the years I worked in radio, on my way in at 3:30 in the morning, I would stop and get a large coffee, drink that when I got in, and then we would always make a pot for the morning people, and that's how you would drink it, right? So I never made it at home. My wife does not drink coffee. So please don't hate me for this. I go every morning, either before or if I'm going to the gym, I go after the gym. If it's not a workout day, I go whenever I get up and go out. I buy the New York Post and I get a large coffee from Quick Check. Right. I could see your facial expressions.
No, not at all.
Now, listen, I bounced around. I was a 7-Eleven coffee guy for probably my first 30 years in radio. And then during the, it might have been Sandy, whatever, the 7-Eleven that I used to go to used to be open 24 hours a day. They didn't open until 5 a.m. and I was already at work before then. So the Dunkin' Donuts drive-through was open all night long. So then I migrated to Dunkin' Donuts and I fell in love with, I love Dunkin' Donuts coffee. Then Dunkin' Donuts went away from the styrofoam cups, which really ticked me off. I didn't want the cardboard. And my Dunkin' Donuts during the pandemic, they weren't open overnight. So I ended up at Quick Check, a brand new Quick Check had opened in Pine Beach. And I said, let me try it. Well, now I'm hooked on Quick Check coffee. I get a large, I use half and half and a Splenda and a half. I'm only a 1 cup a guy. I used to drink a lot of coffee. I'm 1 cup in the morning and that's it. I don't have another cup the rest of the day. Have I gone to the Rook Coffees of the world and places like that? Yes. Here's my analogy, fellas. I love wine. I love red wine. I can't tell the difference between an $8 bottle and a $58 bottle. You know, I'm very happy with a lot of $8 wines. So if you want to give me the cheap coffee that these pure Brazilians would roll in their grave over, so be it. I like Quick Check.
Okay. Is that the one on 9 there in Pine Beach?
Yes.
That's a good spot.
That's where I go every morning.
Spot. I've been there a few times. Kevin, do you have any daily practices or rituals you do on a regular basis to show up as the strongest version of Kevin Williams?
Oof. I haven't been a strong version of myself in a while. You know, I can't say I do. I certainly like to go to the gym. I went through a period a few years ago where I had 5 operations in 30 months, 3 back surgeries and both hips replaced. So I'm thankful now every morning when I get up and got to get out of bed, which I couldn't do for a period of time. I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that I'm back at the gym, maybe not nearly as hard, working out as hard as I used to, but I'm there, I'm moving. So I like that. And I'll tell you, my favorite thing is the weather has now gotten nicer, is when I get my coffee and newspaper, I sit outside the front of my house. I have a favorite chair and an ottoman. I put my feet up, I listen to the radio, and I read the New York Post and drink my coffee. And I could kill 2 hours doing that. And I love it. It's peaceful for me. Now, once the weather gets nicer, I'll be doing that on the beach.
Sounds like a pretty amazing way to start your day.
Absolutely.
Where are you hitting the gym? You go to Tom's River Fitness?
I go to Planet Fitness in Tom's River.
Okay.
You know why? Because it's relatively inexpensive, which is great when you've been guilty of how many occasions have I had a gym membership that I then just didn't go for a year and was still paying for it.
Yep.
You know, so I got a good deal there. I got the treadmill, the bicycle, the weights I want to use. I rarely ever have to wait for anything. So it fits my needs. I've been to listen, when it was the racquetball club of Tom's River, I was there for years. Shelley and Ray. I was a diehard there. I played in a racquetball league with a bunch of coaches, football coaches, played in a racquetball league. Then I would just go there to work out. When they first got Nautilus, it was like a game changer. Nautilus equipment. Wow. Like, look at this. I was a member there for many, many, many years.
Bringing back lots of memories tonight, Kevin.
Yes, I have done too many to count spin classes with Shelley and Ray back in the day when I was a young buck at Tom's River Fitness.
I did spin there for a while, and I don't remember where it was. I was older, but there would always be that time when I'd go, and it would be one of those women instructors who I would just say, I'm going to die today. He's going to kill me. That's the best workout I've ever had. I mean, I can't do it anymore. I have neuropathy in my left foot. That's the best workout there ever was to me, was spin class.
Yeah, those were pretty fun. I used to enjoy the music in the dark room, just getting after it. Yeah,
love the music. The music was tremendous.
Yeah, Ray had a great playlist. What are you listening to right now? Music, podcasts, audiobooks? Are you reading anything?
I'm finishing up John Grisham, and I can't think of the other author's name. They're very involved in one of these innocent projects where they help death row inmates try and get off if they take their case. And they've written a book about some of the cases they've had over the years, which are just mind-boggling. Mm-hmm. You realize, don't ever get arrested in the South, because there is no justice in the South. I mean, it's just unbelievable what some people have gone through. So I'm just sort of finishing that up, which is an amazing book. I like in the summer to read novels. That's my mind check on the beach. You know, Grisham books, Nelson DeMille, any of those, books. I do want to read the new book that's just out about Joe Biden with his mental thing falling off at the end. That is just coming out. I'm interested in reading that. So I'm reading that. I've never gotten into audiobooks, and I think part of that is because I don't commute. I was never a commuter. Like, I have friends I know who commute like an hour and a half. They're audiobook freaks. It gets them through traffic, Yeah. So I've never done that. I think I've told you, I've confessed, I'm not a great music person. I like talk radio because I like to be able to get someone, which is also still listening to podcasts. But music-wise, I'm so bizarre. Listen, I'm a product of the disco generation. When disco was big around 76, 77, I was 21 years old, man. It was my music. I was a club guy, you know what I mean? So I still listen to some of that stuff from the old days. But then I will tell you, my favorite group of all time is Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, which makes no sense whatsoever because I love them. Billy Joel, Bruce, of course, all of that stuff. And podcasts, like I said, I've just jumped in. I listened to a few selected ones with never subscribing, but I've jumped into the Kelsey Brothers one, the New Heights podcast. Just started listening to that not too long ago. Serial, I was referred to by my brother. I've listened a little bit there. And I want to get into the one with Jason Bateman, Will Hayes, and Will Arnett. I think it's called Smartless, which looks like it's really funny. So so that's really it. That's it for me. I'm a very boring person.
You ever cut it up at the Bamboo back in the day?
That was my place. That was my place. I there was one the summer of 1977 and 78. I didn't go to the Bamboo. I lived
at
it. The Bamboo. Now, you can always tell the stories because, first of all, it's gone, right? Mm-hmm. Anyone involved is gone. But it was open till 3:00 in the morning on the weekends. Mm-hmm. And they had a back bar, which we used to call the VIP bar. And the bouncers, the bartenders, all right, time to go, everyone. Everyone would go out the front door. And then probably about 15 or 20 of us would go into the back bar. And there was many a Sunday morning I walked out of there and looked right into the sunshine. Uh-huh. Yeah, those were good days.
You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. I always remember there used to be an old guy who sold the Sunday Times. On Saturday night, he'd come into all the bars in Seaside around 11 o'clock, and he had the early deadline issue of the New York Times. And I'd buy the Times and take it home with me Sunday morning at about 6 o'clock in the morning. Oh, the stuff we did. Oh, thank God. Listen, thank God there were no cell phones with cameras then. It'd be a game over.
You got that right.
Game over.
You got that right. Kevin, last one we got for you to close out. It's a lighthearted, fun one. You're down in Ocean County. There's probably some great restaurants. It could be a food. There's lots of great new breweries. Maybe you have a craft beverage you like. Do you have a guilty pleasure?
Well, I would tell you my guilty pleasure is really spending a lot of time on the beach, but it doesn't really answer your question. I'm not a IPA guy. I never jumped into that. I said I drink the Quick Jet coffee. I drink Miller Lite beer. Listen, I'm a sissy. I admit it. But guilty pleasure, I really do. I've been on a little bit of a kick for the last couple of years, which I've been much more sensible on how I eat. I eat really one big meal a day, and that's about it. I love eating bar food. Man, get me in any bar, get me wings, a burger, I absolutely that's when, all bets are off, man. I'm not worried about, I'm not having salad. Put the salad on the side for another day. Love wings. I'm a wings guy. Love wings, but I don't like them spicy. So I guess I would say guilty pleasure. I really do like bar food. And in the summer, I spend a lot of time going to my favorite places over at the beach. I mean, if I start, I got the Crab's Claw. They're dear friends. I've known them forever.
Shout out to the Hammers.
Yep. Oh man, Sam is one of my favorite people in the world. I go to Cleese. I love Cleese. Now that they have the outdoor area, it's even better. I hit Bum Rogers, my friend Jerry at Bum Rogers. I've been there for a lot of things. Chef Mike's ABG is tremendous. I mean, I like those outdoor places. I love being outside in the summer. I hate being stuck inside, So if there's a place that's got a patio, although as we all know, and you guys grew up in Point, sometimes in the summer it's kind of hard to get into those places.
Yeah. No doubt.
So, but that's my guilty pleasure: outside bar food in the summer.
Where are you going for your favorite burger?
Oh, man, I'll tell you, every time I think I found the best one, I find another one that's even better. I'm into the smash burgers now.
Yeah.
I really like the smash burgers. Tell you what, I say this and I mention them. Bum Rogers has a great burger. The Crab's Claw has a great Angus burger that is absolutely delicious. I always say to Sam, look, I know it's a seafood restaurant, but I'm going to have what I like to have. The Office Lounge has good burgers. It's one of my other favorite places in Toms River. I've never had a bad meal there in 50 years, and I've eaten a lot of them there. There's just a lot of, you go to places that you don't think of burger joints, and all of a sudden says, hey, you got to try the burger. And it seems like everyone has raised their burger game at the Jersey Shore. If they sell burgers, they're usually pretty darn good. And let's be honest, how do you screw up a burger?
Yeah, you're right.
Right?
You're right. You been to Burger 25?
I have. Burger 25. Now they've got 3 of them. I know they got the one by Icarus Brewing.
Icarus, yeah.
Yeah, they got the one there. They have one on Long Beach Island, which opened last summer. Obviously, I go to the one in Toms River the most. I have shied away from the milkshakes, which everyone tells me are off this world because I just know the calories. I just look at it and know I just gained 2 pounds. So I'll have the burgers and the onion straws and be content with that.
All right.
Kevin, do you have a favorite slice on the boardwalk, or are you not a pizza guy?
No. On the boardwalk.
Or in general, Jersey Shore, favorite slice.
You know what? My wife and I, we usually have pizza one night a week. And it's always like, well, where do you want to get it from? And it depends on if we're getting a Brooklyn Square, if we're getting, or the Grandma Pie. I like Brooklyn Square very much, especially the one in Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
But on the boardwalk, this is tough because I got so many friends up there. I love Three Brothers from Italy. I really like Maruca's. If you like tomato pie, Maruca's is the gold standard on the boardwalk. There's no better buy for what you pay for it than the Sawmill gives you a slice that looks like 3 slices. You can't go wrong. You can't go really wrong with anyone. Although, I tell you what, pizza on the boardwalk has gotten very expensive.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! But that's the way of the world today. But I have places. I tell you, I forget names of places. I found this place in South Jersey a couple of years ago. It's all the way down there by Atlantic City, whatever. And I'm gonna text you guys the name. It was tremendous. There are a lot of pizza places that I really like. We have Shady Rest here in Bayville, not far from where I live. They got a nice outdoor garden in the summer, and they have the tomato pie. You get the pizza and the antipasta for that's it. You're set. You don't need anything else. So a lot of good places.
You ever go to the Anchor Inn?
Oh, I forgot the Anchor Inn. I'm embarrassed. I grew up with the Anchor Inn. I mean, you went to Central, we went to the Anchor Inn. It was like a legendary place. The nice thing about the Anchor Inn is if you want to know what life looked like in the 1960s, just go to the Anchor Inn.
Yeah.
Because it hasn't changed. It's literally time stood still there. It's great. You can't beat it for the price. A lot of the same people at the bar. Take pictures. You'll see the same people the next time you go. It's a great neighborhood place. And that's the other thing too. Let's be honest. We've gotten, hopefully, as we've gotten older as adults, you got to be really careful if you're going to have a couple of beers, how far you are away from home. Sure, if you can call an Uber if you're out with friends, but if, you're out with your wife, you don't want to go too far and then, have 3 glasses of wine and then all of a sudden say, oh, I can't drive. So I like to stick close to home unless I'm going somewhere where I know my wife can drive. An extra beer too many, she can drive. So got to be careful about that, especially in the summer here at the Jersey Shore, with a lot of the maniacs on the roadways.
Yeah, no doubt.
Kevin, thank you so much. Thank you for sticking with us overtime. This was an honor and a pleasure. You hit all of those nostalgic feels. We got touched on a lot of topics, and you got us vibing the Jersey Shore right now. So thank you so much.
You guys are absolutely awesome. I appreciate you letting me sort of wax poetic. Somebody who's 18 today might say, what's my grandfather doing on there? But, I do have a lot of history here at the Jersey Shore, and as you guys do as well. And I appreciate you honoring me to have me on and allowing me to pontificate over time, so to speak.
Yeah, it's been awesome to go down memory lane and hear about your story and just chop it up with you about Ocean County. So we do greatly appreciate your time and hope that you have a wonderful summer. Enjoy the beach, and yeah, make sure you wear your SPFs though.
Absolutely. I use 30 now all the time.
There you go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is the great Kevin Williams joining us this evening. Make sure you check those links in the show notes. Go say hi to Kevin. Tell him that the Airey Bros sent you. That is all for us this week. We do hope you have a great rest of your week and enjoy your weekend. Next week, we will be back with Jim Grunwald from Wheaton College Wrestling. And then Tom Huck will be joining us from Claw, the new freestyle/scholastic or folk style wrestling league that is opening up. So we're excited to get back on the mats, go belly